Hey everyone, and welcome. Today, we are going to uncork the secrets behind some of the world's most incredible white wines. We're going way beyond the simple fresh and fruity stuff to explore the winemaking techniques that create white wines with unbelievable depth, texture, and, get this, the ability to age just beautifully. So let's dive right in. So let me just ask you something. When you think white wine, what's the first thing that pops into your head? Is it something light, maybe a little simple, something you're supposed to drink, right away? If that's you, you are not alone. That's how most people think about it. But what if I told you that's only like half the story? The reality is, there's this whole other universe of white wines that are made on purpose for complexity and a long life. I love how the source material puts it. These are wines that actually need years to show their true colors, offering a way richer experience. Yeah, these are definitely not your average summer sippers. They're the result of some serious artistry in the winery. So, here's our game plan for uncovering these secrets. First, we're going to rethink what we assume about white wine. Then, we'll get into three huge decisions winemakers have to make: the fermentation choice, the quote-unquote magic of lees, and how oak changes everything. And finally, we'll tie it all together so you know what you're looking at in your glass. Okay, first things first, let's bust this myth right open. Now, it's true, a ton of white wine is made to be super crisp, super aromatic, and drunk within a year. But here's the thing, that's a stylistic choice, not some kind of rule. Winemakers can go down a totally different road, one that leads to a completely different kind of wine. So it really all comes down to this big contrast. On one side, you've got that style we all know, young, zippy, bursting with those straightforward fruit and floral smells. But on the other side, you have these wines that are deliberately built for more. We're talking more complexity, more volume, a real richness in your mouth, and the ability to get even better with time. And this is where the real magic begins. All right, let's get into our first major technique, the malolactic decision. Once the main fermentation is over, the one that makes the alcohol, the winemaker has this huge choice to make. Do they want to keep that sharp, zesty acidity? Or do they want to transform it into something softer, something creamier? And that transformation is called malolactic fermentation. Now, this isn't about yeast and sugar anymore. This time, it's all about bacteria. Yeah, friendly bacteria. They're encouraged to basically eat one kind of acid and convert it into another. And that completely changes the texture and the feel of the wine. And honestly, the best way to think about it is this. Picture the sharp, almost sour bite of a green apple. That's malic acid. Now think about the smooth, creamy texture of yogurt. That's lactic acid. This process literally shifts the wine from that apple sensation to the yogurt one. It's pretty cool. And it's not always an all-or-nothing kind of deal. Take Albarino, for instance. This grape can have super high acidity, so a winemaker might let just a small part of the wine, maybe 10%, go through this process. Then they blend it back in with the rest. It's a clever trick to just soften those sharp edges and add some complexity, all without losing that freshness we love. Okay, next up is a technique that, I'll admit, sounds a little weird at first, but it has a massive impact on flavor and texture. We're talking about working with the lees, essentially using the leftovers from fermentation to build a much, much better wine. So, what exactly are lees? Well, simply put, they're the dead yeast cells and other tiny particles that just fall to the bottom of the tank after they're done turning sugar into alcohol. But this gunk isn't waste at all. No way. It's actually a treasure trove of flavor. The real magic here is a process called autolysis. So as you can see in this diagram, those dead yeast cells, they start to break down. And as they do, they release all these amazing compounds right back into the wine, especially these things called manoproteins. And those are the absolute key to adding that signature rich texture and complexity. And here's what it actually looks like in the tank. That cloudy stuff floating around, that's the lees. And it's not just sediment, it's like a battery pack of potential aromas. We're talking about those amazing smells of fresh bread, brioche, or pastries. Those are the kinds of complex, savory notes that you get from aging on the lees. So, how do they get all that flavor out? Well, winemakers use a technique called batonnage. It's just a fancy French word for stirring the lees. They'll periodically stir that sediment up, putting it all back into contact with the wine. And they'll do this over and over, sometimes for weeks, sometimes for months, to extract every last bit of that goodness. So what's the payoff for all this work? Well, it is huge. You get a wine with way more complex aromas, a smoother, rounder feeling in your mouth, and less of that harsh, bitter character. And what's really cool is that the stuff released from the lees acts like a natural protector, helping the wine age more gracefully. It's a total win-win. Finally, let's talk about where the wine actually lives while all this is happening. The choice of the container, usually between stainless steel and an oak barrel, is another one of those game-changing decisions for a winemaker. And the choice here couldn't be more different. Stainless steel, it's totally inert. It doesn't add any flavor, so it's perfect if you want to keep those pure, bright fruit aromas front and center. Oak barrels, on the other hand, are an active participant in the whole process. They add their own flavors, they add texture, and they let these tiny, tiny amounts of oxygen get in, which helps the wine develop and soften over time. Now, when you combine aging on lees with oak barrels, you can't just shake the barrel around. You need special tools. Stirring up the lees inside a big barrel is tricky, so winemakers use something called a baton. It's basically a long stainless steel rod used to get everything moving. And they can get pretty high-tech. There are even more advanced versions with chains on the end that can bend and articulate to stir up the lees even more thoroughly. This just goes to show you the level of detail and pure intention that goes into making these kinds of wines. So, what does oak ultimately bring to the table? Well, you get a deeper, more golden color, you get more body and structure in the wine, you get those classic aromas, vanilla, toast, a little spice, and you get much, much better potential for aging. Of course, all this extra work and the cost of the barrels themselves means these wines are almost always going to be more expensive. Okay, let's wrap all this up and talk about how you can actually use this knowledge to go out and find some of these incredible wines for yourself. Here's your cheat sheet for the wine shop. You want to look for these key phrases on the label. If you see aged on lees, or the French version sur lie, that tells you the wine spent time getting cozy with all that good stuff. If you see barrel fermented or barrel aged, that's your sign that oak was involved. These are the clues that you're holding a wine that was built for complexity. And really, that's the big takeaway here. Malolactic fermentation, aging on lees, the use of oak, these aren't just boring technical steps. They are the winemaker's palate. They're tools to transform simple grape juice into something really profound. A wine with layers of flavor, a beautiful texture, and the ability to tell a new story every single year it ages. So, the next time you're picking out a white wine, maybe you'll look past the usual suspects and search for something with a little more to say. Now that you know the secrets hiding in the bottle, what kind of adventure are you going to pour into your next glass? Cheers.